Welcome to Sproutcast, where we speak with changemakers, social innovators, and entrepreneurs about how to make the world a better place.
Thank you for listening to Sproutcast. My name is Julia Duffy, and today I'm speaking with Ninna Larsen, founding director of Reground. We'll be chatting about how she started her small-scale, sustainability-minded enterprise and her thoughts on how retail and service companies can foster behaviour change through positive engagement with sustainability. Thank you for joining me, Ninna.
Thank you for having me.
Wonderful. Now, I like to begin by delving into some background on my guests. So I was hoping you could share some of your backstory with us, in particular, what first sparked your interest in the type of work that you do.
Yes, I guess, well, to start from the beginning, I am originally from Denmark and I studied a Bachelor of Design, Culture and Economics in Denmark. And after I finished, or actually, maybe I should just rewind a little bit again, because as I was studying, which was obviously, it wasn't about designing, it was about the theory of design. And that can be anything. It can be a chair, but also societies and like on a broader scale. And then running a small business or running a business was a part of my education. But as I was doing that, I was introduced to sustainability, which is actually a really important part of my career, I guess, because I was doing an internship in Denmark at the Danish Cultural Institute, where I was working on building a non-for-profit kind of organization, communicating sustainability through art. And that was the first time I ever touched on sustainability, although I do believe that my mindset has always been about kind of how, like, I guess I've always been a bit pessimistic in terms of like how the world is, where we're going with the world and that. But I guess me sort of finding work in sustainability was actually helpful to me because I kind of addressed my biggest fears for the world and became a bit hands-on with kind of trying to find solutions for that. So it gave me sort of a positive angle to this kind of fear. But that was also hard. Non-for-profits, in my opinion, are tough. And when I finalized my bachelor, I moved to Australia. So I kind of jumped right into the coffee industry in Australia, in Melbourne, where I live. And I got a job first just working on the floor at 7 Seeds. And then I later on worked up at the Brunswick East Project, one of Padre Coffee's cafes, where I worked for 1.5 years. That was where Reground came to me, the idea of Reground. And I think then, like for a time, I kind of just worked for money, I guess, and also just for meeting people, and it's amazing. But I was getting really existentially bored, and also, again, this fear of like where the world was heading for me was really creeping in, I guess, and I started just thinking about solutions again, and that was where Reground kind of happened to pop up. And yeah, I just had to address the amounts of coffee grounds that I was throwing into the general waste bin. That was kind of what led to Reground.
Right. So I guess now is a great time to, I guess, set out for anyone who is not aware of what Reground does. Yeah.
Reground is a waste removal service. We pick up ground coffee from cafes in Melbourne, and we pick the bins up on our bin runs, and then we take them to end users that are home gardeners or community gardens or other organizations that are working on turning or in need of organic matter for soil improvement. And they're taking the coffee grounds. And so we are diverting waste from landfill, because normally cafes would throw all the coffee grounds into a general waste bin. So it's a simple kind of like just change of behavior, really. But it is a waste removal service in essence, but we are much more than that too.
And so could you explain, I guess, how the business model of your organisation works?
Yeah.
So you said it's a waste removal service.
Yeah.
Is it the cafes that are paying for this service?
Yeah, that is how it's set up, because it's a waste removal service. They're paying already for their coffee grounds to be taken away by a normal waste removal company. So we're just kind of like a small scale waste removal company that are just taking it to end users that are using it for something sustainable. But the model is that the cafes are paying us. They are the waste producers. They pay already. So they're also just paying someone else now. It's not that they're not paying for it already. And then we give away the coffee grounds to our end users. Before I started Reground, I did a bit of research on other projects that kind of addressed the same problem, and projects that were set up to also pick up coffee grounds. And they actually often did it the other way around. So they would pick up the coffee grounds for free and then charge the end user. And that to me just didn't make sense at all. And also because there's a constant production, I guess, of coffee grounds. So to run a sustainable business, we have to integrate that kind of income, the cash flow, into the business by charging the waste producers. And we call our cafes waste producers because they are producing waste, and by paying someone to take it away, you're also really taking a stand on what you want to do with your waste. And by paying Reground, you're putting money towards using waste as a resource. And so for us, it's also in the message. It's like, this has value and you should pay for that. You should help create a better world. You know, often we get questions like, why is your service not free? And it's like, so you would pay normal waste removal companies to put waste into landfills that is a resource for our soil, but you are reluctant to paying initiatives like Reground to do something better with it. That is, you know, that kind of mentality that we're up against, because really people should pay for projects that are doing exactly the right thing and not for just the lazy kind of version of that, where we're adding to the world's problems. But I mean, once we have these conversations with people, it's, you know, easy for people to understand why the model is set up the way it is. And also it allows us to do more with our time, because we have resources to actually communicate the message and connect the cafes with our end users so they can see where the coffee is going and really, you know, spread the message, because that's really what we're up against. It's this behavior that we have, that we've learned in our society, that waste is just going into a bin and then it's just gone. We don't really know what's happening with it. And this behavior is so integrated that it's so hard to actually engage people in changing that. Mm-hmm. But that is something that we can do. We can attack and we can kind of discuss when we have the funds and the resources that the cafes give us to really, on a much bigger scale, change that. So that's why the model is the way it is. And it's really something that I would encourage other people or like business operators to look into as well, because it's hard work changing behavior. It's really something that's worth a lot of money.
My next question, which was about what the kind of end purposes are for the coffee and I guess connecting that to how you engage with your community, because I found that really interesting just kind of from checking you out online.
Yeah, it's really interesting because a lot of people ask us if we turn it into something, and we don't. Like, we are actually just the logistics, I guess, but we engage in very heavily with our end users, because we have to educate people on the uses of ground coffee. So our end users have come to do a range of different things with their ground coffee. From, I think the most normal use is they add it to their compost. And some of our end users, some of our home gardeners have extremely big gardens and like really high levels of composting. The setups are amazing sometimes. It's actually really fascinating how much time people spend on developing good structures for that in their garden. So that's the most common use for the coffee grounds. Some people add it directly into the soil, which is, I guess, the easiest way to use coffee grounds, because it doesn't require any kind of work. But we also have people using it for mushroom growing, which is amazing. You can sort of get a second use out of the coffee grounds. And then we have people turning them into pellets and like compressing the coffee grounds to burn. Like, for example, there's a business in the UK that are doing exactly that, but they have a different system altogether as a society where they can actually turn the pellet into energy for households, etc. But on a smaller scale in Australia, for example, you can burn them or you can use them as fertilizer, so you can spread the pellet on your garden or we have a guy that's using the pellets on his olive grove, and it's just amazing the outcome of that, the olives grow so big and delicious. And then we also have people that are experimenting with using the ground coffee for building materials, like an alternative to concrete. And we have also seen examples of people experimenting and innovating with using ground coffee for clothing, for fabric, and for ceramics. So there's so much you can actually do with this, but I think the easiest way to really get behind something like this is to use it in your garden, obviously. But yeah, we encourage people to get creative and create new products and create new ways to use it, because it's a free resource for them as well, if you know what I mean. It doesn't cost our end users anything to start experimenting with it.
And in what way do you engage with these end users or find kind of new end users who may not be aware of the possible uses for the coffee grounds? That's
our biggest challenge, I guess, as a business, but it's also the greatest, like the funnest one, because the end users are amazing. They're so passionate. And so what happens is, so it's pretty much word of mouth at the moment. We've been in a few sort of newsletters like Local Food Connect, or we were in the Leader newspaper here in Melbourne, and that was where the majority of our end users, they're reading this newspaper, so that was perfect for us. But what happens is that when we engage one end user, because they're so passionate about their gardens, they talk to 4 of their neighbors, and then all of a sudden it spreads like that. So it's really interesting to watch how we have pushed so little and experienced so much interest anyways. Now, I just wanted to add that lots of our end users are also, the people of the cafes that we service. So in that way, we're connecting our clients, the waste producers, and the people in the other end, the end users that are, doing the resource recovery. And I think that's a beautiful kind of gap, because they are actually a part of the same community.
Excellent. And so I'm wondering, kind of in a practical or logistical sense, what your plans are for the future. Are you planning to kind of just expand as much as possible kind of in both directions of the waste providers and the end users, or branch out into anything else? Kind of what are your expectations or your goals for the future?
My expectations and the goal is that we have our vision, which is to turn waste into a resource. So coffee grounds is kind of just the start. Mm-hmm. And it's important, I think, to understand and accept that when you are tackling and when you are dealing with a big and complex problem like climate change or sustainability, that you understand that focus is required in the beginning, because you cannot, change the world in one go on all levels. So starting with a focus is definitely the greatest step you can ever do and take. And for me and Reground, we are wanting to do constructive growth within the business. So we want to sign up more cafes, which we soon can, because we just crowdfunded a van. Currently, we are renting a van, so we've hit capacity in terms of the cafes, which is sad, because we actually cannot save any more coffee right now. But now that we're going to get our own van, which means that we can be on the road every day of the week, we obviously want to sign up more cafes. And then at the same time, we also have to sign up or bring on more end users. So more people are going to benefit from this, and the world is going to benefit more as well. But in terms of our long-term, or sort of my expectations, is that not only, I think, are we going to add another waste stream to our collection scheme, which will probably be a free service. I want to collect, which is completely different to what we're doing now, but we want to collect soft plastics and flexible plastics, because that actually is a big issue for medium-sized businesses. At the moment, they don't have, so majority of their other kind of next to after organic waste, it's the soft and flexible plastics that just ends in the general waste bin. And there's actually also use for that. So we want to add that to our service, because it just ends in landfill at the moment. So we're turning more waste into a resource. But also in terms of our message, I think I'm expecting that more people are gonna be composting. I hope that many more people are going to get behind this, not just in terms of being a cafe owner and signing up to Reground or another composting business. I'm expecting that people are going to, this is going to become a part of mainstream kind of communication, that standard households is a compost bin. That is the goal, that we as individuals learn because of the conversation that we're having to take responsibility for our own waste on a much kind of smaller scale than what Reground is working at, but that we're kind of influencing all levels because of the conversation. And then also long term, my goal is to engage the state government in creating more compost facilities, because there's definitely a huge lack of that.
I really like that attitude to sustainability that I think you guys have, and say Keep Cup and Who Gives a Crap, of the positivity and the kind of this is what you can do with things you're doing in your everyday life, rather than kind of coming at it from a negative perspective. And it's empowering, I guess.
Yeah, I don't understand why anyone would ever blame or shame people for not doing anything. There's a reason why we are struggling so much, and the world is struggling so much. It's because we're super time poor, all of us. But I'm not going to start doing positive things for the planet, which seems almost, I guess, for some people unrelated to my daily life, like what's happening with the planet, because I don't feel that it's directly related to me. But it is. It's such a huge part of my life. It's my home. Like, the planet gives me a place to live. What I was just saying about climate change and things, this is, I don't know if you can tell, but that's obviously something that it's a fear of mine. It's kind of like, oh my God, I fear it so much that I have to do something about it. And I'm sure a lot of people don't fear it as much as me, and so feel less strongly about it. But to me, it's kind of like an intuitive way of living. It's kind of what is natural in this world. And I think we are time poor. It's also like acknowledging that we live really busy lives, so we have to do something that's easier for us. We don't want to add a lot of hard things to our lives, because then we just get stressed, and that's unhealthy as well. So we have to encourage businesses to help us make our lives simpler, because that will allow us to access time and feelings that are so important to our well-being that we don't even realize that is possible. But I think it is. I'm just going back to when I used to work as a barista, and when I started Reground, and I then started using my own service, and I knew where the coffee was going. Like, the feeling that I have being a barista was just, oh my God, I can sleep again because I don't throw shit in landfill. And because in landfill, organic waste creates methane gas, and methane gas is 20 to 40 times more potent a greenhouse gas than what comes out of the cars. And yeah, so for me, it's like small, tiny things that are not harder for example, cafes to implement. It's actually easier. It's just it's a no-brainer. But yes, I still think change is hard. I understand that as well. Like, change is really difficult. So that is going to take time. And I think we have to allow a bit of time for change to happen.
The next question I had was, I guess, around some of the challenges that an organization, specifically with a kind of sustainability or environmental purpose, might face, where they have to, I guess, weigh up any sacrifices or compromises to their mission in order to achieve the kind of greater goal. It's something I discussed with Abigail Forsyth when we spoke for the podcast about kind of changing their production. They had to make some decisions.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if that's something that you've come across yet, or a decision you're expecting to have to face.
Oh, yes. Everything's easier when you have a small-scale operation, because you can kind of sell your products or your services at a higher price, and hopefully people will buy your product or your services. And you can kind of keep production, I guess, more local and better materials. That's just how I think, because it's a unique kind of product and service. But for us, as we scale, because that's how it is right now, like in our operations, we drive a car, we drive a van. This is what we face as a business specifically. I would love if that was electric, because that's actually the only part of our business that's polluting. And someone was actually asking me if that counterbalanced what we're doing with the coffee grounds. And of course it's not, but like whether it was actually, is it worth it then?
Was it difficult for your crowdfunding campaign to be for the car when the car is, I guess, the part of your operation that is not as sustainable?
Yeah, it's totally wrong, I guess. But to be honest, I've done, and Caitlin and myself, Caitlin is my business partner, we have pushed and we've talked to pretty much every van salesperson in Melbourne and pushed for an electric van, and it's just not available on the market. It's just so frustrating.
You can only do what's possible, I guess.
Yeah, they just create what people want to buy, and we want to buy something else. And then we're just being told that we can't because it's just not available. So it's like the chicken or the egg, right? But I mean, we've discussed what to do and what the plan is for that, because yes, it was hard to crowdfund for a van that's run on fossil fuels because it's against what we are trying to achieve. But I do believe that what we're doing in terms of our impact has a greater kind of scale to it than what we do in terms of driving in the van. Also, we are extremely efficient when we do the run. So we are on the road as little as possible, and our end users are as close to our cafes as possible. So we are very efficient because, to be honest, sustainability is about being resourceful and efficient. It's not about adding hard work to your life and actually adding kind of time. And although sustainability is a slow, organic growth, when you talk about sustainability in any kind of way, it's always slower than unhealthy growth, which is fast. But in terms of our operations and what challenges we have, it's definitely the conversation around our van and our vehicle. And that needs to somehow change. But I wonder how fast that's going to happen in Australia.
So I wanted to change track a little, just kind of as we're finishing up, and chat about the process when you started Reground, of any, I guess, challenges you faced, but mostly around kind of where you found the most assistance, I guess, from the outside when you were starting up, whether it was from mentors, a board, or anything like that.
I was quite alone when I started Reground. I think I was pretty idealistic and I really wanted to address this issue, and I actually had a lot of support from my colleagues, not so much in terms of business. Reground is my first business and I studied business, so I had a bit of kind of support in terms of knowledge. But doing business is much different to studying business. It requires so much courage and it requires a lot of kind of belief, and sometimes I would also say blind belief or like blind hope. You know, you just don't know whether it's going to work or not. And all you can do is just work hard. So it's super scary. And for me, I didn't seek out any mentors or any kind of people that was in that sphere, because I was also told by a number of my just friends that, oh yeah, just don't talk about it too much. It's such a good idea. Like it almost sounds like something that should exist already, and that makes it just so accessible for people to do as well. So don't talk too much about it. So I think I was pretty scared about also being open and honest. But
was that bad advice, or do you think, or good advice?
No, definitely not good advice, because I think they said it out of like they wanted to help me. But I think there's no help for a founder of any business to be alone in that. You need a team around you, whether that team is just your friends or whether that team is colleagues or whether that team is some just advisors from other industries that has a good knowledge on or like experience in starting businesses. You can really find support in a lot of ways, but that advice in not talking about it is really bad advice, because you also, I think, learn so much about your own business by talking about it. There are so many questions that you need to have an answer to. You need to have reflected on to actually provide a convincing answer to your cafes, or like in my instance, my cafes or the end users. So for me, any kind of conversation is valuable, always, still is. But yeah, back then it was probably more important than ever. Obviously, there are a lot of questions you just don't have any answers for, and that can feel frustrating too, because you have to do all the research and that. But so there's probably more work in having a conversation than for me to have a conversation about it now, because now I have most of the answers. But it's so important to have humans around you that believe in you, that, you know, can see the value of what you're trying to achieve, even if that's just someone that have no fucking clue what you're doing, like, and just know that this makes you happy. I can tell. And when you're sad, I'm gonna just tell you, remember how happy you were like two weeks ago when you had this win? Because that's another thing you forget when you are part of starting up a business, is that there are so many wins, but there are also so many downtimes, and it's easier to get overwhelmed when you're down, I think, than when you're up. But you have to have that proper support. Yeah. So talking about it is very, very important, and still is. And I think for me, I had a friend who studied, my best friend actually, that I traveled with in Australia, and she went back to Denmark and then went on to study innovation and entrepreneurship in Denmark. And she said to me one time, "Oh, my lecturer just said this, and it really resonated with me, and I think you would like this quote as well, is that it's better to have a team and a B product than a product and a B team."
Mm-hmm.
So your team is much more important than what you have to offer, because if you have good people, passionate people, driven people around you, you can change the world just by being that team. And I think I found a lot of happiness when I brought in Caitlin into the business, because I am someone that's also really social, and my ideas just accelerate when I have someone to bounce them up with. And so she's now like majority of my support, because we're in this together. So I think a lot of business founders and business owners, they're like, "Oh, I want it all to myself," but really sharing is caring, and sharing is just making the world much better. Like collectively, it's just better to discuss it with everyone and anyone, and seek out information, and in all kind of ways. Like I find the best advice come from people that don't even know what I'm doing sometimes.
So in addition to starting organizations, I feel like sustainability is something, or a purpose which in particular is well suited for entrepreneurship, or people who are kind of wanting to make the company that they work for a little bit more sustainable. Kind of what are your thoughts on that movement and how it differs from starting an organization?
I don't think it's constructive or sustainable to just create a business just to create a business. If you have something or have someone that is willing to let you create something within their overall organization, that is as powerful as creating a new organization. So I think there's so much value. It's kind of related to what we talked about in terms of what we can do as individuals. If someone sits with that kind of drive or creativity to create internally within an organization, that is beautiful in its own right, because you're also protected, I guess, from some of the struggles that you would have doing something completely new. So in that sense, there might be something that you can do more efficiently and faster, especially when it comes to sustainability. I think the world doesn't have much time. So if we can find a venue on a way to speak about sustainability within an already existing organization, that is really great. Like that's probably the best case scenario. Yeah, I've done that myself. That's kind of how I got so into creating Reground. I think it kind of started my drive for change. And I think there's a lot of creative freedom in letting people do something like that. So, for example, in my organization, in my business, I would love if people came to me and said, Ninna, I want to create for example, I actually want to create a non-for-profit arm of Reground called Baby Planet. And I don't have the time because we Caitlin and myself, are time poor in terms of the actual operations and growth of the business. But if someone came to me and said, Ninna, I'm going to take charge of that. I'm going to create this. This is going to be my channel. I would be like, you go, girl, or you go, bro. Here you go. You have the creative freedom. And I think, that's something that's amazing, because I do believe people start caring more if they feel ownership of something. But obviously, it's not everyone that needs that kind of ultimate freedom. And I think it's very valuable to just have that entrepreneurship as well, because that is bloody what the world needs.
The final thing I always like to ask guests is whether you can think of someone you'd like to give a shout out to our audience about a person or an organization, an enterprise who's doing great things either in your area or another area that you think people might not be aware of.
Yeah, well, I want to give a shout out to a Tasmanian blanket brand. Maybe you know them. They're called Seljack, and they create really nice merino wool blankets from offcuts from a mill in Tasmania. And I just supported their crowdfunding campaign. They're kind of tackling waste in a different space than I do, but they are two sisters that are doing amazing as well. They really have found their focus, created a really great product. Like holistically has done a business model that is just absolutely bulletproof. It's great. And down to how they send out their parcels and is carbon neutral. And I just want to say that, all that support you can give to businesses that are doing things the harder way, because it's a definite that, them, Reground, Keep Cup, anyone else that are kind of in that space of behavioral change are doing things the harder way. So I want to give a shout out to those girls, because they're super cool.
Excellent. I think it looks like their website, if anyone wanted to track them down, is seljak.brand.com.au. And so to finish up, where can people find you and find Reground online if they want to find out more about what you do or get in contact?
Yes, we have a website. It's reground.com.au. But I guess our main communication is over email or over our social media channels. Instagram is a big one for us. We're pretty active there because we believe that's a really good channel of communication. But yeah, we love to hear from people that just want to, talk about something to do with changing the world, or even if it's not that, even if it's just like, this is what I'm doing, I just want a high five. I'm like, cool, that's great. Like, we just want to, this is a space where we have to support each other. Every business that are, doing something for the better. Or even if you're just an individual that's just, as we were discussing at the very beginning, you're part of an organization or you are working for someone, you really have a chance to change things as well. Like, you don't have to go out and create a business to do that. You can create like a subdivision of an organization that is as impactful as the overall business or organization. So I think it's important that we just consider that all creativity, good creativity, has support from the industry. Even if we're not related directly, I think people should just get in touch in any way. Social media, email, or our website.
Thank you so much for joining me today on Sproutcast, Ninna. It's been really lovely to speak with you and learn about your organisation.
Thank you so much for having me, Julia. It was a pleasure.
Did you enjoy this episode of Sproutcast? Visit sproutcast.net to sign up for our newsletter. The newsletter includes copies of the show notes and additional content from each episode.